in Oakland, California. It was a cold October morning when, while walking through Merritt Park in downtown Oakland, we passed a small zoo with a large sign in front of it that read, Children's Fairyland. Children's Fairyland, Srila Prabhupada read. Pointing over to the horizon at the skyscrapers in the distance, he added, Adults' Fairyland. He continued walking as his young disciples looked at each other and smiled. It was what we lived for on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, the words of a transcendentalist, someone who could cut through our illusion and explain things in simple, concise terms. He said no more about it, and he did not need to. In 30 seconds, he exposed the folly of modern civilization. So, I love these kind of bits of Srila Prabhupada where it's humorous, but at the same time it's so deep. And in just 2 words, he just showed us all, the futility of the life that most of us are pursuing. We can understand when we see children playing their games, we understand, it's children playing games, having fun. But yet, and then you think that when children grow up, they become adults and get responsible. But really speaking, we still maintain our irresponsible streaks, and we're just doing it on a larger scale. Like children are building houses with Legos and then breaking it the next day. We're doing the same thing. We're building houses and skyscrapers and then tearing it down a while later. So, Shri Shri Radharadhanath ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Prabhupada is just showing us this, and in just 2 words, he just, shone light in this whole, around this whole topic of what our lives are really, what our so-called material progress is actually just an adult version of, children's fairyland. And I actually, there's many more, but instances where Prabhupada mentions things like this, with just a few quick words and some humor and some wit, he just crushes things. I think they'll be later in the book, so I won't spoil it for later. I know one other instance is one time a devotee asked, Prabhupada, what is the difference between the mind and the intelligence? Now this is quite, like if someone asked me the question, I'd probably give a whole technical long answer and probably they wouldn't understand much more at the end. But this is what Prabhupada replied. When you look down from a tall building and your mind says jump, your intelligence says don't. So in just one short sentence, he just explained the difference between the mind and intelligence. And Prabhupada had this quality that's mentioned, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami mentions this in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela. He says, essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. And I think this is Prabhupada, truly eloquent, because he could speak the truth very concisely. On other occasions in lectures, he could go on and repeat over and over how we are not this body, how we are spirit souls, because this is a fact that we really need to deeply understand. So he'd repeat these things, but at other times he could just, in 2 words, he could just give us so much enlightenment about our condition. So the next pastime is from October 7th, 1972, in Berkeley, California. One evening, Srila Prabhupada spoke at the University of California in Berkeley, the heart of the hippie capital. The San Francisco devotees enthusiastically received him and relished his lecture. They prepared barrels of popcorn and distributed it following Srila Prabhupada's lecture. "What is that?" His Divine Grace asked. "Popcorn, Srila Prabhupada," Jayananda explained. "Would you like some?" "Yes, give me some," Srila Prabhupada said. The devotees gave him popcorn, which was being distributed in little bags printed with the Hare Krishna mantra. Srila Prabhupada ate the fluffy, spiced kernels with great delight. "Oh, this is nice," Srila Prabhupada told them. All the devotees, especially those who had cooked and distributed the prasadam, felt overwhelmed with pleasure. Now they were certain their offering had been accepted and their lives were successful. Then the next night, Srila Prabhupada had another preaching engagement. This time the devotees brought Srila Prabhupada popcorn and offered it to him. "No, I am old," Srila Prabhupada said. "I cannot do things like that very often. It is good, but it is very difficult for me to digest." He refused, saying, "It is very good. I like it." They were pleasing words to his young disciples. We knew that Srila Prabhupada could do whatever he wanted, and we never considered him old. As we drove back in the car, he explained to me that if he ate something in the evening that was difficult to digest, it would interfere with his rising at 2 a.m. to do his translating work. Srila Prabhupada's activities focused on his service, and there was an abundance of it. Translating books, initiating and training disciples, and opening centers. He kept his bodily maintenance of eating and sleeping to a minimum, just what was needed to maintain health and perform his devotional service, and he wanted us to do the same, while using our common sense. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, it was very nice that Prabhupada accepted, popcorn, something he wasn't used to in India, and this obviously made his disciples very enthusiastic, and so they offered it to him again. But then he explained that it's hard for him to digest. And this is a great lesson for all of us, especially me, that eating should just be to maintain the bodily health. It's not it's not about satisfying our tongues. And especially late at night, he didn't want to eat something because it interferes with his service of rising at 2 a.m. the next morning to translate his books. So I know that's not always happened here. Sometimes we have some late night feasts and stuff here, and you can't really say no. But yeah, it's a great lesson that we should always focus everything regarding our service, including our eating, sleeping. We should arrange our lives such that our service is not hampered. Then the next pastime is from October 7th, 1972. In ISKCON, San Francisco. I had been Srila Prabhupada's personal servant for 1 month. I was beginning to feel comfortable and knowledgeable in my duties. Little did I know that this qualified me for a major setback. One evening, Srila Prabhupada asked me to prepare puris, potato chips, and hot milk. We were not staying at the temple, but at the cottage of a young couple who were friends of the devotees. Before Srila Prabhupada's arrival, the devotees had spent hours cleaning the cottage. The kitchen facility was poor. Fortunately, there was ghee on the stove, so a meal could be prepared. Srila Prabhupada had asked for potato chips. I was anxious to prepare them, but had no experience. Making the puris was easy enough, but took time to prepare. It was getting late, and I did not want Srila Prabhupada to have to wait any longer. I peeled some potatoes, sliced them as thin as possible with a potato peeler, and fried them in very hot ghee. They came out resembling potato chips, but not exactly like any chips I had ever seen. I felt very fortunate to serve the living representative of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada was my living deity, and he mercifully reciprocated with me. I rushed to His Divine Grace with a dish of potato chips, one hot puri, and a cup of hot milk. What are these? Srila Prabhupada firmly inquired, pointing to the chips. Potato chips, Srila Prabhupada, I answered, a bit bewildered. They are not chips. This is not what I wanted. Seeing my pain, he said, Anyway, go on, leave it. I felt terrible. This was the first time I had failed in my service to my Guru Maharaj. I felt like dying. The offering had been unacceptable. I went back to the kitchen and cooked the next puri. Returning to Srila Prabhupada's quarters, I placed the puri on his plate and offered my obeisances. When I sat up, he looked at me with a big smile. These are very good, Srila Prabhupada assured me. It is all right. They are very nice. I breathed a sigh of relief and replied, Oh, good. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. I was in bliss. I did not know whether he really liked them or he just said it to make me feel better. Either way, it was wonderful. It felt terrific to have someone care about me so much. I brought him another puri and waited for him to finish. Picking up his plates, I was thrilled to see he had eaten all of the so-called potato chips. Srila Prabhupada mercifully accepted my bumbling efforts. Months later, while in India, I realized that chips are the British equivalent to American French fries. Being inexperienced, I had misunderstood. I knew then that Srila Prabhupada had wanted French fries. I again made him chips, but according to his instructions. Thin and crispy. Note the spelling discrepancy. It is not an error. Srila Prabhupada often used endearing words. I preferred his use of the word crispy for crispy. It sounded crunchier. Srila Prabhupada, how you responded to my chips was another example of your kindness towards me. I know that I was so young and foolish when I was serving you. I was 21 years old and did not know how to do anything. There were thousands of others similar to me. You dealt with all of us in such a caring, patient manner. It was not difficult to become attached to you. It was difficult not to. Thank you for always showing us how a devotee acts. Once a devotee entered your room and began to shut the door. He asked you if he should close it. You said, You can leave it open. We have no secrets. Please help me live my life with an open door. So this was a very sweet exchange where Prabhupada, I think, well, we know when someone asks for chips, we probably figure it out because, we're used to the British thing like chips is chips. But in America, Shrudakirti Prabhu is an American, and so he knows chips as French fries. And he thought chips was the very thin one, you get in the packet. So he tried to make that for Srila Prabhupada when Prabhupada was wanting the French fries. But anyway, Prabhupada was so kind that he accepted it. And then he asked for it thin and crispy. And these endearing words just made Srila Prabhupada even more dear to the devotees. And that's it's another type of exchange of love, that even though it wasn't what Prabhupada wanted, he accepted it, because he was purchased by the love of his disciple. And then the next pastime is a very, very important pastime. It's a bit long, but I think it's very important. On October 12, 1972, in Manila, Philippines, I had been Srila Prabhupada's servant for a month now. It was the first time I had ever been outside of the United States. I did not have to arrange for my passport, visa, or airline ticket. It was all done by Srila Prabhupada's secretary, Shyamasundar. My service was to take care of His Divine Grace's personal needs 24 hours a day. I still could not believe my great fortune. While I was his personal servant, it did not matter what country I was in. I traveled around the world with him 5 times in 2 years and went to so many countries, visiting big cities and small. The only places I saw were the airport, the temple facilities, and wherever Srila Prabhupada went for his morning walk. To this day, I still haven't seen the Taj Mahal. Srila Prabhupada had a mission in every sense of the word. He never deviated from it. Just before lunch on the 12th, I was massaging Srila Prabhupada in his hotel room. Purijan Prabhu was present for the massage. While I was rubbing the mustard oil on his back, Srila Prabhupada said, "My godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This is not done in India. Only brahmacharis can live. But I have become successful because I have made this adjustment. Although they criticize me, their Gaudiya mats are empty. The only time they have people coming is during Gaur Purnima to Mayapur for parikrama. And who is coming for parikrama? Widows, women in white. Because I have made this adjustment, I was successful." He then became quiet. I began to think about the amazing adjustment he had made. He then nodded, which meant I was finished massaging his back and should move to the side to start on his arms and chest. Seated next to him, I continued to think of what he had said. The room was quiet. I rarely asked him a question. So many devotees asked questions. When others were around, he was always busy preaching, solving problems, and helping his disciples in so many ways. I considered it a part of my service to allow Srila Prabhupada some peace and quiet. But in one paragraph, he had given his formula for spreading Krishna consciousness in the West, something no one else was able to do. I tried to formulate a question and repeated it to myself several times. This was not unusual for me. I have a tendency to think about what I am going to say, and this time I wanted to ask it just right. Finally, convinced it was a worthwhile question, I said, "Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle?" Srila Prabhupada closed his eyes and I continued to rub his body. Finally, he opened his eyes and responded, "That requires a little intelligence." He did not say anything more on the topic during the massage. Srila Prabhupada, I consider your words on that day an understatement. It again shows your level of humility. No one but you could have made such a radical decision. To this day, sadhus in India will not travel outside its borders, considering it too dangerous for their spiritual life. You were Abhay Charan, fearless. You were unafraid of the decadence of the West. You did not care for the criticism of your godbrothers. Your only concern was to fulfill the desires of the previous acharyas, deliver the fallen souls throughout the world, and bring them to their home in Mayapur Dham, at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. So this is a very, very, what I consider it an understatement as well. This is probably the biggest understatement I've heard in my life. That requires a little intelligence. Because Sri Kirti Prabhu asked such an important question. Basically, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle? It's such a key question because in spiritual life we have principles and then there's details. And the principles are eternal and should never ever be changed if we want to make spiritual progress. But the details actually must be changed over time to maintain the effectiveness of the preaching. And if you change a principle, you will lose the spiritual potency. But that's the harm of changing a principle. But if you don't change a detail, eventually you just become irrelevant and your preaching stagnates and people don't become Krishna conscious? So it was such a key question that Srila Kirti Prabhu asked, and I'm sure if Prabhupada was present now before us, many devotees would be asking this question more and asking for more information, because this is such a key question for us all. Well, especially the leaders of the Krishna consciousness movement, not me personally so much, and not maybe us, but this is such a key question to always ask. And in all our endeavors in sharing Krishna consciousness, we have to constantly evaluate and reevaluate our methods of sharing. Obviously, if doing what we did always is still effective, yeah, then that's great. We should go about carry on doing it. If it's still causing more people to take up spiritual life and to really embrace Krishna consciousness, then we should always keep doing what we're doing. But then if we see that what we're doing is not having those desired effects, then maybe we need to look and try and be more relevant to what people actually want, and what and make people understand how Krishna consciousness can actually give them the happiness that they've been looking for. Because if someone's not practicing Krishna consciousness, what it means is we actually haven't shared to them enough how that Krishna consciousness can bring happiness into their lives, or it means that we've shared something with them, but it's not really hit home. It's not made the impact on their life that resulted in them taking up spiritual life. So, such an important point, and Prabhupada says that requires a little intelligence. So, hopefully, we can pray to Prabhupada to please give us this little intelligence that we can implement his desires. So, the next pastime is, just on that same point, Prabhupada himself, obviously one thing he did was he allowed women to live in the temple, which was a radical thing at the time. Now I think we don't think of it as such a radical thing. I mean, it's quite normal for us here, but in India it's a massive decision that no one else does. How can women live in the temple? It's like something beyond their conception. But Prabhupada did some other pretty radical things as well. Like you may or may not know, we had a political party in ISKCON, the In God We Trust party, that Prabhupada encouraged initially. Later he disbanded it when he saw that it was distracting the devotees from their devotional service. But he was bold enough and innovative enough to sanction a political party of ISKCON, the In God We Trust party. And then there was also a road show with a rock band that we had in ISKCON that Prabhupada supported, and later on, as he saw it was not very favorable for the devotees' Krishna consciousness, it also got disbanded. But Prabhupada allowed these initiatives, and generally from what I've seen personally, Prabhupada was just very innovative. I mean, he was very strict about chanting 16 rounds and following the regulative principles and maintaining sadhana. But he was very, very permissive over different preaching strategies, different ways of sharing Krishna consciousness. Of course, if sometimes these things, the more you engage with the material energy, the more risk there is to your own spiritual life. And like, for example, if someone is trying to be a musician to preach Krishna consciousness, but in the back of their mind, they actually want to become famous, then that desire will overwhelm them, and their sharing of Krishna consciousness will suffer that way. Or, like, for example, I know one thing my sister has done on quite a few occasions, where she's distributed books in like bars and places. And yeah, she's quite a powerful devotee, but perhaps like a devotee who's a recovering alcoholic, before they came to Krishna consciousness, probably that's a bad idea for them to go and try and distribute a book in a bar, because they might just resort to their previous ways and stuff. So these things require some intelligence, some common sense, and but it's always good to try and be bold and try and share Krishna consciousness with others, and at the same time try and protect our own spiritual integrity. So, we've got like about 5 minutes left, so maybe we should take some questions, comments, or reflections. Okay, yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful pastime. I remember that one. I'm not sure if it was Chandramouli Swami or no. I think I might be getting confused, but I remember it very clearly, and it's such a beautiful pastime. I'll just mention it again so that everyone can hear. So one time, Prabhupada wanted halava, and the devotee, in their enthusiasm, they didn't use the normal, the semolina that we use. They used some other type of wheat and they thought, it would be really fancy, and Prabhupada would really be pleased. And when they presented it to Prabhupada was so upset because it was not at all what he wanted. And then obviously the devotee became very depressed after that, that they displeased Srila Prabhupada. And they went to the temple room and prayed to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who's the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, to please forgive them. And immediately after that, Prabhupada called the devotee back to the room and said, and was kind, and asked for even more of that. So and actually finished the whole pot, I think, if I remember correctly. So even though it wasn't what Prabhupada wanted, he reciprocated with the love of the devotee. And it shows us as well the saying that the grandfather is even more merciful than the father, because they displeased Srila Prabhupada, but yet their grandfather, in a sense, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, showed them the mercy and changed Srila Prabhupada's attitude toward them at that point. So, yeah, in one sense, Srila Prabhupada is our grandfather, yes, so we can pray to him in that similar mood for his mercy. And that's a wonderful pastime. There's 2 minutes left. Is there any? Okay. Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, like just recently, Swarup Damodar Prabhu in the class mentioned the pastime about Hanuman, where Hanuman wanted to do the service of clicking his fingers when Lord Ram yawns. But Lord Ram never yawns, he never gets tired and sleepy. But he began to yawn to reciprocate with the service mood of Hanuman. And there's actually so many instances of Krishna accepting service just to reciprocate with the devotee. Not because he actually, it's not a usual service. I know in Jagannath Puri, there's many, many pastimes. There's actually a whole book that Bhakti Purushottam Swami has written of various Jagannath pastimes, many of which are like this one very sweet devotee, but not a very sweet, simple devotee. She's not so much aware of all the way things are done. I'll just conclude with that. And she was making khichdi for the Lord, and not in the proper method. And so, but Lord Jagannath reciprocated and actually used to eat her khichdi. And they found the khichdi on his face one day in the temple. So we'll observe. So we'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Kirti Prabhu ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu